exciting that we have a few different subject areas. I'm English, rhetoric, and humanities. So, you know, we've got me and Rebecca here, but it'll be nice to hear from others as well about how their classes are kind of structured. So what attracted me to the flipped classroom model was just about thinking about how we structure our class time. I was exposed to it probably 3 years ago for the first time, and it felt very unnatural for me. And then over the past couple of years, I've sort of started to adapt some of what the flipped classroom model is all about. Mainly when I worked as an adjunct, and I still do work there, at Robert Morris, which is now Roosevelt, but they're in their evening cohort model, it was blended. So we only met for an hour and a half, and then blended. The other hour was then online. So I had to do a lot of flipping there. Where I wasn't lecturing, all of that material was in their out of class work. So when they came to me for that 1 hour and a half a week, I could really hit the ground running with doing activities. So I think that I saw success in that, but there's also been not a lot of success. So I kind of want to talk about both and see where you can see yourself flipping your classroom. But let's just start with what's it all about. What sort of exposure or familiarity do you have with this model? Was this the first time you've heard of it? Was it something you've heard previously? Any stories about it or assumptions? If you want to just say like first time or not sure or
not sure.
Yeah, okay.
Not sure.
I've used it in a couple of my classes, and I actually really like it.
Awesome.
For me, I actually am almost doing it completely now that I'm remote. And exactly what you're talking about, you're almost freaking me out a little bit, because as soon as I'm done getting ready for spring, I'm actually going to start thinking of how I can take some of this, because I feel like I'm reaching the students better. Whereas I could only do some of this maybe on a quarter of its scale when I was face to face. So I think it's really cool.
Yeah. Oh, super. Yeah. Interesting. Definitely. All right. Awesome. Here's a good visual just to kind of set up what the model is. In a flipped classroom, you've got before class, in this out of class, you've got students preparing for class activities. So you're thinking about what you're thinking about is the activity. What do you want them to do during class? Then you can kind of design that backwards and say, what do they need to know before they get to this point? That leaves room for, again, outside of class. What they're doing is they're understanding their learning, extending their learning, kind of checking in and reflecting. How did this activity go? What did I learn? What do I need to follow up on? Like, what didn't I get that I now need to do more work on? I also have a little video, let me switch to sharing my screen, that goes through both models kind of really clearly. Let's see if this will. This is where last week I kind of, oh, there we go. Is the sound sharing as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Every course that has some face-to-face component progresses through a sequence of in-class time and out-of-class time. In a traditional lecture-based class, students are typically assigned material to study before coming to class, but then are expected to sit through a presentation that often covers similar content, and then assigned something to do for homework, usually on their own. In a flipped class, students have access to the instructor's lectures ahead of time, along with any other background material that they need, which frees up face-to-face time to let students seek clarification from instructors, collaborate with peers, and practice applying concepts while getting guidance and feedback directly from experts in the moment when it can help the most. This lets students leave class with an even greater collection of resources and a clearer awareness of what they need to focus on to close any gaps that remain in their learning. For more information on the flipped classroom and other teaching.
All right, so you can clearly see how you had the doing of the activity outside of class, and by flipping that and putting it in the class, it allows students to ask questions, get guidance. If they were at home, they might have questions. They might kind of stop and maybe not even complete it, and then they come to class with their questions. So it kind of allows some opportunity for enhanced learning. Let me stop this. Are we back? Okay. I definitely like using Zoom better than Blackboard Collaborate. I usually use Zoom for everything. And then here's another image that shows both models, the traditional model and the flip model. And this is kind of applies it to the Bloom's taxonomy, which is a hierarchy of skills that we want students to move through as they're learning. So here in the traditional model, you've got new material being introduced in class that hits these first two levels, remembering, understanding. And then as they move outside of class is when they're moving up the ladder into applying, analyzing, evaluating, and then even creating. In the flipped model, though, we've got the in-class work being these higher order thinking skills, the evaluating, the analyzing, and then we've moved the lower order thinking skills, remembering and understanding, to the outside of class. So if you think about it like this, these are the skills that we're hitting in both outside and inside class. Some notes or some points about the theories behind both of these models. In the traditional classroom is more of like the behaviorist theory. Traditionally, you have students, as you saw, previewing materials, going to class, receiving a lecture, then applying that to outside of class work or an activity or homework or an assignment. In that traditional model, we've got a famous behaviorist, B.F. Skinner, who created behaviorist theory, and that it is observing kind of this, what they believe is our behavior is a response to environmental stimuli. So it's more concerned with observable behavior. So, and it's not as concerned with internal events. So students are coming to class, they're observing you, they're observing the learning or what you want them to accomplish, and they're repeating that or they're mimicking that. It also uses operant conditioning. So the behaviorist would use rewards and punishments to condition your behavior. Yes, you got it right, you got an A. No, you didn't get it right, you got an F. So that kind of reward punishment is conditioning. It relies on an extrinsic motivation. And it believes in tabula rasa. So that's a theory that says we're born a clean blank slate. And because we're born this blank slate, we're receiving all this information, and that's what's building us as people. So it's more like behaviorist theory, I think of as looking at it as like we're animals, where you can condition animals. We learn through what we see. Kind of like, when if you teach like a monkey like a different trick or a skill, there's a lot of here's a treat, or like Pavlov's dogs, like you can condition them to have a certain response very easily with the rewards and punishments and things like that. We see this in drills, so any sort of teaching that relies on drills, or guided practice where students are watching you do the thing that you want them to learn. And then also study packets. So study packets would be sort of a behaviorist theory where, all right, we've learned a concept, now we're reviewing it, and it's kind of like this back and forth. Learn, review, learn, review. Whereas in the flipped classroom, it relies more on the social constructivist theory. Famous social constructivists are people like Lev Vygotsky and John Dewey, who I love. And they believe that knowledge is constructed and that learning relies on the social interaction. So that learning is contextualized and relies on more of those internal events. So like feelings, beliefs, thinking, or contextualized to the world around them. If you're experiencing like a trauma or something that's happening, we're bringing that context into the classroom. And it's a collaborative experience. So because we're learning through social interaction, it relies on collaboration, teamwork, working socially with others. And it believes that, we do have a free will to construct our own meaning that we do have a choice in how we put our learning together and what we believe. I pulled one point, the zone of proximal development, from the socialist constructivist theory, because I thought it did align with the flipped model. So that's the zone of proximal development says that there is an ideal place that you want your learner to be in, and this visual kind of shows it. You want the learner to be in this shaded area, which is the things that they can do with a little bit of help. If they're in this blank area, or this first slide, it's things that they can do all on their own. So if they can already do it on their own, you don't want them to be sitting in that space, but you also don't want them to be sitting in this space of things that they can't do no matter how much support they get. So the more advanced things they haven't learned yet. You want them straight into that sweet spot. So with that in mind, how can you structure your class time so that they're sitting in this optimal learning space? They're not able to do it yet, but they're learning how to do it with guidance. I find sometimes that students will end up over here in the I don't know what I'm doing and I can't even start when they're at home working and they come to class and they've done nothing because they've been in that spot. But I also find that sometimes students will sit in this first area when they're in class. They already know what I'm teaching them. They're just listening to the information. They can already do these things. So if I throw them into this space by putting them in groups, I learn more about where the students are at and where I can push them to get outside of that comfort zone, and then also I can help them if they're in a land of they don't know how to do something. So I think that's really what's a good visual for me in justifying why the flipped classroom model could work quite well. Some things that you would do in the social constructivist theory would be things like think, pair, share, problem-based learning or experiential learning, which I've done a workshop on experiential learning before. Which are really cool. But really, what is this model all about? And I would say that it's about promoting active and collaborative learning. Flipped model or like the flipped classroom, those are just words. What is the meaning behind those words? We usually kind of sometimes get like into this buzzword, even like things like guided pathways. We latch educators we latch onto like these buzzwords sometimes and we try and emulate that because we think it's what we're supposed to be doing. But I really want to look at it not as like this is the newest, coolest thing to do, but what is the meaning behind it? And so when I look at the words flipped model, what I see is, promoting this active and collaborative learning because now we have this space in class to do those things. So hopefully that made a little bit of sense now that you're hearing it. What sort of the connotations and the theories behind what this model does or is. Some examples. So we've got different types of classrooms, or different types of flipped classrooms. Not all flipped classrooms are alike, and you can do a variety of different things. So the standard inverted classroom would be moving lecture from in class, out of class, moving the homework out of class to in class. That would be just very standard. You could also do a discussion-oriented flipped classroom where they're watching TED Talks or other videos. You're having them watch something, and then in class doing the discussing. And that's better for things like English, art, literature, philosophy. Or a demonstration flipped classroom as an example. You can have them watch a recorded demo of a chemistry or physics or math problems. Have them watch them before class, and then when they come to class, it's not that you won't do those things, but they've already been familiar with it. If I think about going into a physics classroom day, what are we doing today? And the teacher will demo it for the first time. I've never seen it before, but if you've recorded a demo, they've watched it, they've previewed it, they come to class knowing about it, then you can just hit the ground running and then kind of jump in. You're kind of jumping in and their feet are already going, kind of. They've already been familiar with it. So that was an example. And then there's also group-based flipped classroom. And this one says that you've got the full traditional class is moved outside. It's an outside class. When they come into the class, it's all group-based project. So they come in the door and they're jump into their teams, and it's a lot of team learning. this one for me would feel very disorienting. It would feel like I have a very strong sense of lack of control when students will jump in right into their teams. So there's not a one-size-fits-all approach here, and it's definitely not something you can apply. Maybe one lesson or two lessons can be flipped, or you can flip a whole class. I mean, either way. I do have a case study that I can show. Let me see if I can jump back out of here and share this screen, unless it'll. So this is a case study from 2013. It kind of is, it shows a classroom or a school that was behind in retention, and they kind of used the model as like their saving grace, So it's kind of over sensationalized, but I think it gives some clear examples of what it could look like.
Not literally, of course, but having lessons offered at night at home and homework done by day in the classroom. That's the experiment underway at Clintondale High School, just outside Detroit, an area still reeling from the economic and social ills of the nearby city. The school serves many low-income families and faces tight budgets and declining enrollment. Just 3 years ago, almost half of Clintondale's ninth graders were failing math, science, and English, and overall school performance was ranked in the lowest 5% in Michigan. Principal Greg Green decided to take a risk.
Frankly, we were doing very well, and so we had to make a change. We were desperate for change.
His aha moment came while coaching his 11-year-old son's baseball team. Having learned to record and post instructional videos for his players to watch outside of practice, he was struck by how much time was then left to focus on individual players on the field. He saw the educational potential, starting with the power of videos.
Just go back and watch it as many times as they want. And me as an instructor or expert, I don't have to redo that all the time. I can spend my time with the students in class and actually assisting them. And so if I could do that with 11-year-olds, imagine what we do with 15 or 16-year-olds doing math.
Green went all in, flipping the entire school, urging his staff to rethink the use of technology and how it complements traditional teaching, and getting local businesses to help fund the effort.
The legislative branch makes the laws.
Now lectures are recorded and posted online.
The American Civil War lasted from 1860 to 1865.
Or teachers can assign outside videos from the popular Khan Academy and TED Talks. Students watch these videos as homework outside of class.
What do you say to the zoning?
In class, students now do what was once considered homework, assignments designed to test learning comprehension. Clintondale teachers say this allows more time for one-on-one help and often encourages students to collaborate problem solving. But English teacher Rob Damron said it took some convincing.
When we first did this, it was funny to look around that staff meeting, look at a lot of staff members, especially the ones that have been here 25, 30 years, and say, what are you talking about? What's a blog? What's a Google group?
Apostrophes makes a noun show ownership or possession.
For teaching for 20 years, I know what lessons kids are going to have a problem with. But I think with doing this flipped approach, there's problems I didn't even know existed. So you really can't hide back there in the corner and say, yeah, I got it. And then the teacher sees later on, well, no, he really didn't get it.
One problem the school faced head on, students who can't afford or don't have access to technology outside of class. They're given extra time in the school's media lab.
Segregation before 1954.
Taking the technology-driven approach further, some lesson plans are now tailored to have students use the latest trends in social media.
The 19th Amendment is when we have the right to vote. We deserve to vote. We deserve to vote.
Like this project that required constitutional amendments to be summed up in 6 seconds for the popular website Vine. Green says that taken all together, after 3 years, the flip is paying off.
Our ACT gains have shown, doubling the national average as far as ACT gains. State tech had some mixed results on that. And we've also seen an increase in graduation rates at almost 90%, college acceptance rates at 80%.
Senior Darrell Wallace Jr. is one example. His grades have risen from a 2.5 GPA as a freshman to 3.5 as a senior. And he says the flip has played a big role. He now watches videos on his cell phone while taking the bus home into a rough section of Detroit. He lives with his mother and 4 sisters.
I really looked at the videos more because I know I might not have as much time at home because my sisters are in college and they need the computer, so I'm like, I can do it on my phone. And the bus ride is like 30 minutes, so I probably can get like half of my assignment done.
Daryl's mother, Sabrina Young, also likes the flipped model, saying there's only so much she can do to help with traditional homework.
Especially algebra. So him doing it at school is a plus for him and well as me, because I just didn't remember the majority of it.
The popularity of online learning has surged in recent years, and flipped classrooms have started popping up everywhere, from elementary schools to some of the nation's top universities. Clintondale is the first U.S. high school to do a total flip. Harvard's Justin Wright has been studying the trend and says he's cautiously optimistic.
What is exciting to me about the classroom is that it gets teachers asking 2 really important fundamental questions. What are the best ways for me to use my time, especially the very precious time I have in classrooms with my students? And then what are the kinds of direct instruction that I could provide that could be digitized so that people could watch it again?
Notice that the last set of notes I gave you were for week 5.
But Reich says that flipping alone isn't enough. As with any lesson plan, it all depends exactly what's being offered.
If what we see from the flipped classroom is that we take bad lecture, uninteresting worksheet problems that characterize a lot of the experience that students have in schools, and we simply flip the order of those 2 things, the odds that we see significant improvement in our schools is pretty low.
And so now we're going to be taking the derivative with respect to T.
Meanwhile, some individual teachers are experimenting with the flipped classroom on their own. 3 years ago, Stacy Roshan flipped her upper-level classroom at the private Bullis High School outside of Washington, D.C. Students pay up to $35,000 a year in tuition. She says it's been working for her, but that it might not be for everyone.
I think what's the most important thing is that you really think through what your problem is. I wouldn't say that because everybody's doing the flipped classroom at school, you should do the flipped classroom too. My problem was really time, anxiety, and then perhaps if I went to another school, I would do things completely differently.
One added surprise for Roshan in structuring her class this way is what she learned about the reach of her online lessons.
I get thank you letters, students all the time, not even just from the US, but overseas too, and that part always amazes me.
Back at Clintondale, Principal Greg Green's big experiment is getting.
I wish I got thank you letters. But those were some good examples. I like that the students do mine. I thought that was interesting. Was there any other points or pieces that kind of caught your attention in that case study? I think they kind of were a little rosy a little bit on like, okay, PBS is recording me, so I better make this look really good. But I thought it was cool how they flipped their entire school.
Well, at school they have a lot more time, especially this is a high school, right? Yeah, they have a lot more time to actually do the homework and the stuff they're supposed to do in a traditional classroom outside. While in the classroom, given sometimes the time the students get to show up on Zoom or collaborate, and they show up in the middle of the class, some of them show up in the middle of my class. I could just see flipping it and having to do all their homework while they only have half the time left. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. it's nice to have a captive audience. With my experience, I get a lot of the athletes.
Okay.
I work with the athletic department, so I whatever issues I try to work it out with Emily, Joe, and everybody else there, and they show up late sometimes. They show up late. I collaborate. So yeah, if I flipped it, I don't know how I would pull it off. Because it looks like they have a lot of time on their hands for him to sit there and go over what he's trying to do with them. What the is all about. Yeah.
I could also see it being helpful for you though, because if they're coming late and they're missing content, then they would have that content like in pieces that they can look at outside of class.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah,
I can see that.
That's one of the arguments, that the students now have access to this but they said it was a reliance on videos. So I was curious what you guys felt about relying on videos, video lectures, YouTube, Khan Academy, like all of these,
I don't want to hog everything up, but it was something. Was it something the president said? One of her things at the beginning in August, she asked one of the students who, I don't know who was walking through the hall, but evidently she saw one of the students and asked him how his first week of class went. I remember her saying that the professor posted his video and that's all he saw for the class. And she says, "Oh, I'm sorry you had such an introduction to your first week of class." I don't know. I thought about posting all these things that I do through my Collaborate, my Zoom classes, and videotape posting them, but I don't know. I like the interaction. If they have any problems, let them ask me like I'm asking. You're talking right here. I got evaluated yesterday. The assistant dean at the other school I'm at evaluated me. I wish I did well. I don't know with a Zoom meeting. I've never had that happen, and I said I've been teaching for 5 years. Yeah. So I don't know. She asked if I had videos, and I said no. I do live. These are sequential meetings. I like to keep it sequential. And whatever else they need, I do it through there. It's Brightspace. It's like Blackboard. I do it through Brightspace or through emails. Plus, things like that to take care of any issues they have. Yeah.
It's interesting that they asked you that.
Yeah. Hope I did well.
Does anyone else use videos or rely on videos in any way?
I actually, this semester, I have every single lecture just about recorded. And that's what I was saying. I tried this flipped classroom aspect of it, and it does work. But what I will tell you is when they get to class then, like they'll have a quiz every class. This is really time consuming, much more than it is when I'm in person. But then we have an in-class discussion, and I literally have a notebook full of questions that I ask them when I do this flip. And I bug them, and it's like, well, what do you think? Well, why did you say it's red? Or, especially for those of you that are listening, I'm talking about literature right now. So when we're analyzing it, and I keep trying to all right, you watch the video, you listen to, because I'll have a video of what I talked about as well as my lecture on the side, and they do both. And then they come in and I just expect them to know it. And we're talking about how we compare it to real life. But what I have to say is I'm exhausted, and I feel like that there's an easier way, which is one of the reasons I'm on here, because when I finish those discussion days, I take a nap. I'm that tired. So I don't know if there's an easier way or not, but it doesn't always work perfectly.
Do you feel like maybe it's just, because you're doing this for the first time, now that you kind of got it set up, maybe it'll run a little bit smoother in terms of it won't be as much work?
Well, I did it in the fall, or not the fall. I did it, I don't even know what semester it is. I did it in the spring for half of it. And I would say I did a quarter of it, and it worked out pretty well. So I saved all those notes and everything. But it just seems like now that I've done it for the whole full semester in all 5 of my classes with 125 students, it just gets to be kind of monotonous. It's not managing the discussion. They jump in, and thank God I'm a fast typer and I understand texting, but it's just tiring. you know, and even though I'm comfortable with the answers and I can work through it, I guess just to think that fast is exhausting for me.
Yeah. I would say I teach as an adjunct, you know, kind of like on the side, and I definitely don't have that time. I rely a lot on TED Talks. So I'm almost like you and I should kind of like meet in the middle, like, you know, recording, you know, your own, but then also, you know, you can pull in previous, you know, recorded material like TED Talks and stuff as well.
Yeah.
Anyone from like nursing or the radiology, any thoughts that kind of came to mind in terms of the content of your classes?
I do most of my classes live, and the only difference with my course is it's a 2-year program, so the students already know what to expect. So that's the nice thing. I have the same students that I had first semester, second semester, so they already know what to expect. So when we do like flipped classroom assignments, they are prepared and ready to go because they already know my expectations. So that's the nice part about having, I guess, students in a sequential program. They already know the expectations, I guess, I would say.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, the same thing for us as well. Nursing, kind of like Nancy, our students are already pretty much coming in with the idea of expectations and what they have to do. But this kind of reminds me, we use a lot of this in sim. So I'll give them like scenario ahead of time, and then by the time that we get to sim, they're pretty hands-on right away. So they know what's expected of them in a sim, like on a sim day. So it's nice, and typically those are the most, I think, productive days for us, other than like sitting in lecture in a lab where I'm demonstrating something beforehand and they're practicing, and everything is kind of coming together, which is nice.
Nice. Yeah, I can definitely see how the content there is more practical. So you already have that hands-on built in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I had a little activity that kind of demonstrated a way to engage students online. Let me copy and paste the link. So I have discovered Padlet. James, you saw this on Saturday, yeah. So
that was mentioned somebody, yeah.
Yeah.
Along with Google, the other one's Google something.
Google Docs.
Yeah, I think she mentioned that. There was a couple of them.
Yeah, let me demo both, or I can show you both.
I have a question for Rebecca. Do you tape your lectures, you know, just like a tape, and then present it to the students on Blackboard and have them view it, or do you tape your live sessions with them there and then just present it on Blackboard? Do you just, or you, which one do you do? Is it just, you just tape it and present it as a video, and then that's it, they just view it? It's asynchronous. They just view it whenever they want. I'm just curious.
It is asynchronous. It's not a video though. It's really my voice, because they're looking at a work usually. Because remember, it's English.
I see.
So like
you put all your PowerPoints up and stuff.
Well, right, exactly. So I have PowerPoints, or they actually have something from the book. Now they're doing literature. So while they're looking at it, they're hearing my voice to go over each part of it. And that is recorded and saved on my Blackboard in folders for every single day. It took me like 4 months to do this year to get it all set up. But then they listen to that. Sometimes I have them do it outside of class, and then they come in and we have a discussion. And sometimes I'm like, go to the folder, listen to the lecture, and come back in 20 minutes. So I've been weighing both of them, but they're always like recorded and saved on there, which has been working out real well. When they have to go back to the papers, they can just go to that day to listen to it.
Okay. Do you do any synchronous? Is the classes required to be synchronous, or is this like a fully online? It could be asynchronous.
No, it's a regular ERL. I have to be there live and I'm talking to them. But what I can do is, you know, basically I can have them, we're all there. but for 20 minutes on some days, they're listening to their stuff. Then they come back and we have a discussion.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. What do you use for your recordings?
It was just some, I don't know, it was just some online voice recorder thing off of the internet, and it worked. It got transferred perfectly. So it's just something right off of Google.
Yeah, I use Screencast-O-Matic. There's like a lot. There's many, like screen recording, voice recording. I can, in my PowerPoint, I can list some of these. You could even record, like we're doing now, record a PowerPoint that you're talking over in Blackboard Collaborate and post that. But that makes sense to do, because then when they get to class, you can do other things like a discussion using like Padlet. So I posted a link to Padlet in the chat box. If you open it up, and I can share my screen, this is one, kind of tech way to have a discussion or to get students involved in the material that they've previously encountered outside of class. So for example, like if you did something like Rebecca did in posting a recorded lecture or recorded material, they can then come to class and jump right into doing some sort of activity. Was everyone able to find that link?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
So here's just 3 questions, and this kind of helps us to think about scaffolding. What do they need to know before coming to class? What can you move outside of class? So if like today, I know that they need to know X, Y, or Z. Is that something I can do outside of class? If the answer is yes, maybe that's something to look into or to do. So what was done, and if you want to think, in terms of like this last week or maybe this term, or maybe next week's lessons, what was something that was done in class that you could have moved in outside of class? And then you just click on this add button to add your thoughts. And then what's something that you definitely cannot do outside of class? And then with that, what would you like to do more of in class? And then you can kind of, once you have ideas for these 3 categories, look at the structure or look at how to structure your outside of class time and your inside of class time. Of course, allowing for problems or issues that come up. For example, like James said, students who don't show up, or students who don't do the outside of class work, so they show up with nothing. There's definitely problems that can occur in this model. So I'm just really interested in hearing more about your content in your classes. This is very specific. So if you can like identify something that you did last week in class and put it into one of these categories. Could it easily have been moved out of class, or it could definitely not have been done outside of class? So this is really just a good brainstorming session. I think this is something that could be really cool with students too, when you're asking them to brainstorm, you know, anything, and there's crickets. You can have them interactively post onto something like this.
Christine, isn't that what blogs and wikis are for?
Blogs I would use as like wikis. It's more informational. So these are like quick comments. I would say people put together wikis when it's like put together a guide on this topic that you could publish online. Then you would get a group together or a team together and say, all right, you've got this concept, go write a wiki about it. Blogs could be used for, I mean, I would use blogs for like journal entries if you want to have them post journal entries, because like right now I'm doing journal entries, but the readership for that is me and them, right? So then to post their journals online opens up that readership and adds a whole nother level or dynamic. So yeah, there's tons of things you can do in class. I mean, I think those are cool. I would say this is more like an informal discussion, quick insights. That, you know, it's kind of nice that you can visually lay it out as well instead of, you know, typing in the chat box, which is something that is really useful. So yeah, it's just a little bit different. So let me just, if scrolling through these, do you have any comments that you want to talk about? Like for labs, like definitely can't, you know, be done outside. Is there a way, or maybe you already do this, of like previewing the lab outside of class, previewing the instructions?
Well, for our labs in radiology, they already get material in lecture, and we review what we're going to be reviewing. So, and sometimes I do provide videos also, so they already have a content on what we're going to be doing. So I guess it is, they do have some material already provided.
Yeah, that would definitely be the demonstration flipped classroom.
I guess I just never even realized that's what it was, so thank you.
Yeah, I think anytime, like this whole problem that we're talking about is anytime you can move something that you're doing in class outside of class to create more time for, like, what in this column we have group discussions. I said group writing, which I hate doing, but if I ever wanted to have a group do like collaborative writing projects, I would. Discussions relating ideas to real world instead of teaching. Yeah, definitely. When I want to relate things to the real world, I need a lot of time for that in class. It starts, things go on to tangents, and it takes a lot of time. So I'm going to need to really structure class to move what I can outside of class. Even things that might not seem obvious. So going over student revisions, I love that. I love sitting down with students and going over their papers and revisions. But lately I've been noticing that I can do that. I can record that. I can record that feedback in Blackboard and give them that, outside of class as well. So that could be helpful. Definitely. One student not participating, working in groups. One thing that I do for this is I'll teach students teach them how to work in a group. So that means assigning like a group leader, assigning a note person, someone to take notes, a timekeeper, someone to, like, each person should have a role. And I make them identify that role and who that person is. And that kind of helps organize them. It just depends on how advanced the class is or how used to, working together they are. Before we go, Another activity we could have done is I created a, let me go back and share this now. A Google Doc. So another way to, so this is what I would do if I had a team, if I had a group working together, and I said, you have to come up with resources. You need 6 resources. They can share that in a, maybe like, I don't know, a top 3 topics. You need 3 resources for each topic. You can have them work collaboratively in a Google Doc, and then everyone has access to it. Everyone can add, edit, delete. It's like a live document. So yeah, Google Docs are really helpful. And I can also send this to, you know, looking at lesson planning, there's a lot of different types of lesson documents or lesson templates. But for this one, I just kind of simply, as we've been discussing, saying, what do students need to know before class? What are they going to then do during class? And then after class, how can you have them reflect and evaluate their learning? So then these are kind of like your guiding questions when flipping your classroom. Okay, and I will, Nancy.
With this type of document, do they all have to have a Google account in order to share it? Like if I wanted to do this during my class as part of an assignment or exercise?
No, let me share the link with you and you can see. So I set it, when I go to share, I set it as everyone, here's the link. So I go to up here to share. Anyone on the internet with this link can edit. So it's not published on, you know, it's not searchable in Google, but if anybody who gets this link can edit it. So that.
Thank you. Yes, it's very helpful.
I'll make them type their name, like I'll be like Tina, you know, and then write your response, you know, so I know who it is. If they do have an account, it'll show up in here. So like right now, you know, you're not logged into an account, so you're anonymous. But if you do have a Google account and you're logged in, it'll show Tina. So like at Robert Morris, everybody had a Google. It was a Google suite of education products. So everybody had a Google account. So then, yeah, I could see who was typing, what they were typing, things like that. Okay, so I can share the PowerPoint and any other resources I find, especially the things like the Screencast-O-Matic or ways in which you can record lectures and record material that you can easily push out to students in Blackboard. You can upload anything to YouTube. I don't know, Rebecca, how do you normally put your materials into Blackboard?
You mean like the lectures or the videos? Because I have all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, the lectures, of course, like I said, is just an online voice recorder. One thing I could tell everybody here is don't use the voice recorder that's on your computer. For some reason, it's always a disaster. So I always go to an online one. But yeah, what you're fortunate is when you, well, if you're lucky, what you want to use is on YouTube, and you can just find it and then go through Blackboard to add that link. But I always go fishing for it on YouTube before I start all this so that I know I can build my lecture around something. And a lot of I'm a TED Talk fanatic myself, so I always, you know, try to find the TED Talks and then link them on there. But you know, it's like anything else. You just got to make sure it's accurate. But when you put it up there. But yeah, YouTube and the online voice recorder, and then had to, I don't know, I've had to like convert a couple things. But other than that, that's it.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you reached out to the instructional designer here at Triton, they would help as well. Oh, shoot, I'm forgetting her name. Oh my gosh, you know how those.
Erin.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, so if you reached out, I'm sure she would be, you know, willing to help you to find a way to get that onto your course, because there's, you know, technology should work for us. there's more you can do in Blackboard Ultra versus Blackboard Learn, but yeah, you can definitely get that content up there for students. Well, hopefully this gave you at least a few little tidbits or ideas, and got you thinking about where to put, what material. Any comments or questions? I know we're kind of going over.
I was just kind of wondering, the last thing you were talking about, is that about critical thinking? You're talking about reflection and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Which, that last part about how can students reflect on their thinking?
Yeah, that was critical thinking exercises and all
Yeah,
that.
that's like metacognition and self-regulation. So getting them thinking about their thinking, because there's so many times where we're just unaware. I mean, how many times are we unaware about how we feel? So if you can bring that kind of to the forefront, I think that helps students to improve their learning when they're kind of in control of their own thinking skills, their own study skills. Anytime where you can get them to do that evaluation on their own versus you going in and saying, hey, you're not doing so well, here's how you can improve. They're going to be a much more powerful learner in life if they're able to do that for themselves. When they're able to say, hey, I'm not doing so well, here's why, here's how I can fix it. So yeah, that last step I think is really important.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Well, it was lovely getting to chat with you this afternoon. And yeah, definitely, shoot me an email. I will send a follow-up email after this session. So.
All right, thank you.
Bye, thank you.